Hey everybody, I'm making a quick video today to talk about Gemini the game and Gemini Studio, the companion app to Gemini. So Gemini Studio, I just want to make it very clear that you do not need Gemini Studio to play Gemini itself. It is 100% possible to play Gemini without the app. The app is really just there for convenience. It allows you to build characters quicker. It has printing facilities. It has the ability to roll dice for you and to play. It tracks things like your body points and the things that you need to track during your game. It does that all for you, for your character. Again, 100% optional. Do not need it. The app itself is in alpha. It's a closed alpha right now, and it's available in the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. And closed alpha means it's by invitation only. So the good news is email me and just tell me, what device you intend to run your Android Studio on, be it Apple or Google, and I will enroll you in the appropriate alpha and you can get access that way. The only thing I ask is, shoot me a line, let me know what you think of the app, and let me know what you think of Gemini when you're done. So that's it. So let's talk a little bit about Gemini the game, because there's been some questions floated my way. People are curious, hey, what is it? How does it work? Well, Gemini itself is a genre-agnostic game. And what that means is the genre is something that the players supply separately. It means that the players have the power to basically play in any setting they want. So for my playtest that I'm planning to run shortly, I'm taking a very well-known fantasy world, and I'm taking the things that I like, the setting, the background, and the lore, and I'm using Gemini as the new mechanical backdrop. And that's a perfectly, legitimate way to play a game. I mean, you don't have to play the rules that the game ships with if you don't like the rules the game shipped with. You can just use the setting and use a different rule set. Similarly, in the same vein, if you find, you watched a cool movie or you played a really cool video game and, you and your friends want to try playing in that universe and there's no game out there to support it, like a pen and paper game, well, you can give Gemini a shot and see what happens. You might actually be surprised at how flexible it is. So, how does Gemini work? Well, Gemini is as I mentioned, a genre-agnostic game. Gemini is a point-buy game at its core. So Gemini has something called creation points. And creation points are used to build your character from the ground up. You spend creation points on your character in things that you want. So unlike, say, other games with rigid class and level hierarchies, you can, for example, cherry pick an ability that you like at a higher level in class and start off with it. Obviously, that's very powerful and subject to GM approval and all those kind of things. But the point is, the ability to do that is there. And if you want to build the character that you have envisioned, you've always wanted to play, you can probably do it in Gemini, if you have enough points, that is. So the limiting factor typically is the points that you're building with. Most of the time, you're going to hit the point ceiling on your character, which actually is a good sign because it means you have room to grow with your character. So Gemini also has a progression system, and the progression system is also freeform, like the build system. In the progression system, you get to choose where you want to progress your character. You don't have to say, unlike in a leveling game where you have to, accumulate a bunch of levels till you get to your next attack or till you get to your next spell level or whatever. You can just buy the spells and buy the abilities that you want to buy when you can afford them, basically. And that obviously is very powerful again. And these types of, this flexibility and this style of building is very powerful and very fun when you get into it. It allows you to really construct the character that you're interested in playing. Where do I spend my points? Well, that's a good question. There's a couple of areas that you can spend your points on in Gemini. And as a rule in Gemini, the more points you spend in a particular area, the better you are in that area. So I'll give you an example. You have 7 attributes in Gemini that help define, your raw potential as a character. These are like, how fast you are, how strong you are, how charming you are. these are sort of things that don't really change much over the course of a character's lifetime. Once they're set, they're typically set. And it's not to say that you cannot do that in Gemini. You certainly can. But it's probably more efficient to buy up skills. And we'll talk about skills in a moment. So coming back to attributes, there's 7 of them in Gemini. And they basically rate on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is, you're not very good at all. And that's like the minimum, you can't have an attribute less than 1 in Gemini. And then 5, in contrast, is like you're like the best in the world. You may be world renowned for your ability to, for how strong you are, how smart you are. You're like a Stephen Hawking's or a power lifter or something like that who's been, who everybody knows is like that guy's really strong or that guy's really smart. So it's hopefully easy to understand. There's not like there's this abstraction where you've got to worry about is it between 3 and 18? Well, no, it's between 1 and 5, and it's a very simple scale, and it makes hopefully sense to people who are coming in fresh. That you just pick a number between 1 and 5, and the closer you are to 5, the better you are. Now, of course, not everybody is good at everything, and you don't have enough points basically to put a 5 into all of your attributes. So you've got to kind of pick and choose like where do you want to be good at. Now underneath your attributes are skills. And what I mean by underneath is that skills are typically tied to a base attribute. So of those 7 attributes you might have, like let's pick on the intellect skill. The intellect skill has a bunch of skills underneath it. Or the intellect attribute, I should say, has a bunch of skills related to it. And these skills basically, again, you can put points into, and the more points you invest into a skill, the better you are at it. So one of the skills under int that is typically very useful for players is perception. And perception is basically your character's ability to perceive and interpret the world around them from an intuitive level, basically. You may find that a highly perceptive character is harder to surprise. They may pick up on things that other characters might miss in the game, and they may, have extra clues floated their way because, they pick up on something that another player misses. And these attributes are sort of connected to a base attribute. It doesn't mean that you're always going to roll your skill with that attribute. It just means that you typically almost always will. There's rules in Gemini for rolling skills with different attributes because sometimes it makes sense to do so. Then we have advantages. And advantages are basically things that, relate to your background. So maybe you're a reporter, maybe that's your profession or your day job in the game. And maybe you have contacts down at City Hall to call on to, get leads and whatever for your work. But they may actually be useful in the game. Those contacts may be able to provide you information about, what's going on with the cops or whatever. And these advantages, they typically relate to your background. And they're directly related usually to, where you come from and, your backstory. Then the next thing that you can focus your points into is something called martial arts. And martial arts in Gemini are basically upgraded or advanced combat maneuvers. So these are optional. Obviously, not every character is going to have martial arts. But it's a way of spending points and upgrading your combat abilities without going into the powers category. And I'll talk about powers now, because just dovetailing into powers. Powers is the last sort of area that you kind of spend points into. And powers it's like a catch-all category for basically anything you can think of. It may be, special training, maybe a mutant power, or maybe you're an alien species. All of those could be captured under the powers category. And finally, these are the last category of things that you purchase in Gemini. It's actually not a bonus. It's sort of you have to purchase 15 points typically of disadvantages. And disadvantages are really there to help strengthen your character's backstory. Disadvantages are things like psychological limitations or physical limitations, or maybe your character struggles with an addiction. And these are things that really help define a character from a story perspective. Maybe your character is afraid of heights. Well, maybe you're playing in a pulp setting game and you've got this big climatic fight, on top of a Zeppelin. that's going to be a problem for your character. They're going to have, a lot of issues getting up there in the first place, and then once they're up there, they're probably going to be terrified of being up there. Disadvantages are a fun way of giving your character quirks and background sort of tie-ins to your story. And it really helps to define your character from a holistic level. Powers in Gemini are customizable. So they're highly customizable. It's because at their base, they're generic. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. There's a power in Gemini called Attack Melee. And it's a very generic power that allows you to do extra damage when you are in melee range with your enemies. It could be, for example, a mutant's claws. Or it could be a set of brass knuckles your character carries. Or it could be maybe you're a mystical martial artist and you can focus your chi through your fists. These are all valid examples of what an attack melee power could look like. Now, there's other ways to customize your power beyond special effect. The special effect will dictate a lot of like the look and feel of the power, and it may have in-game effects as well. And we can talk about that in a later record. The other ways that you can customize powers is with enhancements and limitations. Now, an enhancement increases the potency of a power in some way, and as a consequence, it increases the cost of a power. And limitations, in contrast, they apply some sort of limitation to the activation or operation of a power. And these also serve to customize the ability or the power for you. From a high level, in Gemini, typically you can spend points into powers and you can increase their potency by spending more points on them. So attack melee, there's no cap in how much damage you can do in your attack melee. The only limiting factor is how much the GM will let you put into it and how many points you have to spend. So for example, you could spend 5 points into your attack melee power, and that'll give you a certain potency of attack with that ability. Somebody else may spend 8 or 10, right? And they're going to be a little bit more potent than you with that ability. And their ability could be completely different than you. Like you may be playing the mystical martial artist, they may be playing the mutant who has claws. And it's a totally legitimate way of customizing the character. Even though it's the same ability, they are vastly different in game. This is how you customize your character in Gemini. There's a generic power. You take it, you figure out, okay, well, this, attack melee power. Well, my character, he uses a sword, for example. And he's a samurai, let's say. And this samurai needs to, have a sword to use his ability. Well, that particular feature is captured as a focus in Gemini. So a focus means that, it's a limitation that you can apply to your power. And in that particular case, that character would have a cheaper total cost of their power because the character, like the martial artist, let's say, who focuses their chi, well, you can't take their chi away from them, but you can take a weapon away from a samurai. And the problem there is that, well, the samurai loses his ability to do his, extra melee damage, whereas the martial art practitioner who never took that limitation, they don't have that problem. So you can see, just from these examples, you can take a simple power and you can get a lot of variations out of it. You can get many, different types of character builds out of a single power. Even though, you may have a bunch of characters built who have the same ability, the ability could be vastly different between those characters. So with that, I wanted to say thank you for watching this video. It turned into a little bit longer video than I was expecting, but if you've made it through to the end, congratulations. And thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.